So he wants the base to look like marble, you said?
That was his only real request was make the base look like marble.
Make the base look like marble. Well, that's that's not going to be too hard. All right.
No, that's pretty easy.
Well, welcome back. With me right now is Ed Bradley. He paints prototypes and does 3D printing. We're going to take a look at this model here, which was we were hired to take care of. I was hired to do the engineering on this model, and Ed is going to be. I think you're just going to be prototyping it this time, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about engineering. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we were asked to do by the client, and we're also going to talk a little bit about things that next time we do a model like this, we're gonna try and pay attention to, especially for things like prototype painting and factory reproductions. I'm not sure what the client's going to do exactly with this, but for our conversation, we're just going to focus on the engineering part of this for the purposes of prototype painting. So I'm going to go through some of what we did here. Let's see here. You'll notice that there's a rod in the back. I'm going to cover that first. The rod is simply there because I needed to double check its measurements and make sure that the object was scaled properly. Sometimes you get models and they're not scaled. It's one of the requirements for me. I really prefer that the artist, if I'm not making the model, I prefer that the artist has the model in scale, but I always check with a ruler. I make this object and then I check it with the scale master, usually in centimeters, but sometimes in millimeters if I'm working on a smaller object. The head has the Sculpt has two optional heads, or two heads to it. We're gonna focus on this one for now. But something really cool that Ed pointed out to me before I get into the parts was the base. And Ed was saying that because the SuperMan logo, which is so iconic, it's going to be a bit of a chore to mask off the black from the red. He said with the computer, Ed recommended to me that next time if we were going to do this, we should take this panel off so we don't have to do that. And I think you had a piece that did that, or no? Were they separated?
No, I recently painted two SuperMan statues, and what would have been nice on the logos was for the S and the frame to come off of the background, so you can paint the background yellow and you can paint the S and the frame red, and then just drop the two on top of each other. And there's no masking to do. It's nice and clean and sharp. It's a time saver as a painter. Those are things that sculptors don't necessarily think of. Molding and casting doesn't affect them. It's one more part for them to have to mold and cast, but no one's really thinking of it unless they're the one that has to maneuver around those shapes. So the painters usually look at certain kits and say, man, I wish they would have cut this here and here to make it easier on me so I don't have to mask it or worry about overspray, or if I do a wash, do I have to keep that spot nice and clean. Anything that you can separate and make that job easier, a painter will tell you, yeah, cut it here, cut it there. A mold maker may say differently, but I think the mold makers, it's just a matter of, are you creating more work for the mold maker by chopping things up into smaller pieces? You're making it easier for the printer, you're making it easier for the painter. So that's why I made that suggestion.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned overspray. Can you tell the audience what overspray means? Because
overspray is just, if you're using an airbrush and you're hand painting, freehanding a certain area, inherently you're going to have a little bit of overspray, even if you don't, no matter how controlled you are with an airbrush. You could be a master airbrusher, you're still going to get a little bit of overspray. For example, where his symbol on his chest goes up against the blue of his costume, nobody can freehand that line around the red and the blue breakup perfectly. You're going to have to mask that off. If you don't, you get overspray. So once you get blue on the red, whether it's after you've painted or before you paint it, it's going to muddy up that area. You're going to see it. It's going to bleed through. So then you end up having to either paint the symbol first and then mask everything off around it, or paint the symbol last and do it the opposite way. Either way, it's a pain in the butt.
Right, right. So when I put this together, all of these things, not all of these things were separated, and one of the things that we did separate was the chest symbol, for exactly what Ed is talking about. It's for ease of paint. And I'm going to show you, we're going to go through most of the parts here, but you see through the color coding. I did a quick render with polyframe turned on. Wires are turned off. It's just the color. So we've got the head, which sits inside of the upper part of the cape, which sits inside the chest. The symbol sits inside the chest, and the hands plug onto the chest. We also separated the trunks, the thighs, and the boots, and we have the cape cut into 3 parts because of its extreme complexity. When Ed and I talked about this, I had a plan for this, and initially I was going to keep the legs attached to the trunks, but for the exact same reason of avoiding overspray and speeding up the paint job, he suggested that we separate the trunks from the rest of the model.
And printing also.
And printing also. And we had talked about actually separating the arm underneath the deltoid muscle above the bicep muscle. But Ed had said it really shouldn't matter. Plus the cut is going to really be very apparent on the heavily patterned body. So we decided to keep it all one piece. You can mold and cast that sort of W shape without too much trouble. I think that the trickiest part and the scariest part for this whole project really was the cape. Capes inherently are difficult. A lot of people don't make them thick enough, or they make them complicated. So I'm going to show you some of the fill that we had, some of the fill areas that we had to do, but I'm going to go over some of the cuts and some of the parts here in just a second. Most of the time when we get models like this, they're not excessively complicated. They just need to be, you just have to be thorough about breaking them up. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that we did here. I say we. So a couple of things that I did engineering this. We've got a nice big panel for the chest plate. We may have a small issue with the chest plate, but Ed said that he can handle it. I'm not going to really go into that fix, but the cape has got, it recesses into the body, mostly because we need to maintain the thickness of the cape. Otherwise, the cape is going to fail during printing. We've got a male key on the bottom with cutouts for the belt, and we have a roughly, I think it's 0.6 millimeter tolerance on the belt and the cuffs. The cuffs are also, these are female. Usually make the male, because the male is the pour spout. So if you look at this hand, for instance, if this was being cast, you'd want to pour through the top of that key. The trunks are set up this way. We could have gone male, female, female on this, but I decided to go with 2 males on that one. Thighs go male to female, and the boots are female keys because they have male keys in the bottom because they plug into the base. They probably will have to get a drain at the tip, but that's not for me to decide. So let's take a look at this cape here. This thing was a bit of a bear. We have 3 parts on this cape because it's colossal. I think the length of the biggest piece is just over a foot, or it's just around 15 inches. We talked a lot about this. Ed was nice enough to make some recommendations on the cape. I've done long capes on larger projects. Being larger makes them actually easier to deal with. On small projects like this, they're really tricky because of the thickness. Go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was going to say the reason for my recommendation of doing it this way, this really just comes from, it's kind of piggybacking off of all the kits I've built over the years from the way that other manufacturers have manufactured vinyl and resin kits. I kind of just stole from them what worked, as far as if you have to do everything in sub-assemblies and bring it all together at the end, what's the easiest way to do this cape so that you can do the majority of the painting with everything separate, glue it all together, and then a minimal amount of putty work. Matching the base color of that red for his cape is going to be fairly simple, and cutting it along the edge of the symbol on the back makes it so you can paint the symbol and just mask it off with some tape as you go back and touch up all the red and not ruin all the work you've done. So I tried to think of it from a builder's standpoint, the printing standpoint, since I'll be printing this model, and as well as whoever at the factory is going to be doing the painting. Making it make sense for everybody. Just, you got to think of when you're producing figures like this, you have to think of the other steps involved, not just the one you're involved in. And it's real easy to do it in a way that's easy for you, but the mold and cast guy, the print guy, the paint guys, um, they've got to deal with certain issues of the aesthetic as well. If you don't think it out that far, you create problems that they have to fix. So what I tried to do was give Eric a little advice and say, hey, you make it easier on me printing, and it would make it easy on me painting if you did it this way. So even if I'm not doing the printing and the painting, I'm still solving that problem for the other guy. And when you're producing these figures, there's a lot of stuff I find online, a lot of ready-to-go STL files I'm finding where these sculptors don't know that. They don't understand that, number one, they're obviously not printing their own work. They've never had to try to build it, and they've never had to worry about trying to paint around all this stuff. So that's what I'm trying to bring to these projects.
Yeah,
Just
and I
my years of
before I go on to talking about the fill on the cape, because we only got a couple more things I want to cover on this model. Before I go into the fill on the cape, I want to go to the top part of the cape and the head where Ed had pointed out. I naturally went and cut the head separate and layered it like a layer cake so that it goes torso, cape, head. Ed, you had mentioned paint transfer. You
yeah, I've done a number of Superman models over the years, and what ends up happening is when they design it where the head goes in first and then the cape goes on, you end up with paint transfer on the edge of the flesh where the cape's going to lay on top of it. And if everything doesn't line up perfectly, the weight from the cape causes the cape to want to raise up a little bit. Putting a magnet in the head and in the chest will help the head hold that cape down, as well as uh, the skin is on top of the cape. So if there's any paint transfer, it's going to happen underneath the neck piece. So you're not going to see it until you swap out the heads. So that was my thought process behind that as well.
Yeah. So well, we're really not talking about it. One of the models that Ed had gotten, the way that it was engineered was not by me, and it was you had to put the head into the body and then put the cape on top, and there was a
Which,
transfer of paint from the cape onto the character.
right, just getting where the cape opens up, trying to get it past the head and neck forward enough to match the keys. I was getting paint transfer on the ears and on the cheeks. And when I tried to move it around, sometimes it would hit the hair and take the paint off the hair. And it was just really complicated when they want you to take photographs of all this stuff, or if you're going to have the end product and think, hey, I've got 3 different portraits I can display this with, but every time I swap them out, I'm going to end up with paint transfer. You want to design it so, yeah, it's cool to have extra parts, but if they're not designed right and they're going to rub against each other the whole time, you're going to discourage the collector from wanting to swap the heads out at all because it's ruining the paint job.
Yeah,
So that's
and
all
that
that was about.
yeah, that's a really wonderful thing to mention because if I turn this guy off, I can swap this head. So now I take the head out, and you can see how the key passes through the cape, and then we can just drop the next head on, which is this one here, um, and yeah, that's an easy swap out for all of the people involved. Um,
Yeah. Well, another thing I want to bring up that people may not realize or think of when they're designing figures with capes is the weight of the cape is almost never going to go straight down the back and to the feet. So where you have that cape piece on top of the shoulders, the cape's going to flare out. So it's going to want to rock backwards. The front of that cape is going to want to tip back.
right.
You need something in place to hold that thing down on the figure. So either magnets in the cape itself, but in this case, it's a pretty thin amount of material. So if you put a really big fat magnet in that headpiece, like down at the bottom, around underneath the neck, and then put another big fat piece in that chest area, the cape's not going to weigh that much. The force of those magnets is going to hold that cape in place to make sure you don't have a gap or a seam along the shoulders. And that was what I was really concerned about. Because like I said, I've built enough of these, I've seen enough of these where you put the cape on and the damn thing just rocks backwards, and you're like, okay, that sucks. Um, and even if you make the keys really deep, they could snap off, and then once the male key snaps off inside the female, you're done.
I
So to
wanted
me, this was a better solution.
since you're bringing that up, just so you guys know, when I make keys, the keys are not structural. What I mean by that is the key is for alignment and locking a piece, locking a piece into its nesting area. It's not super long because if they break off, you are shit out of luck. It's a bad idea to make your keys long and spindly because you think that the key is going to hold an object in place. I don't like it when I see people do that. Um, but that's also personal preference. And if I'm making the model kit, I'm going to make it more for it being robust and hopefully taking magnets and or glue or binders or whatever. I know Ed's seen a lot more kits than I have. What do you have an assessment on that as well, or because I know you just talked about keys breaking off?
Yeah, I mean, I know traditionally, when you're talking pre-paints, keys aren't meant just for alignment. They are meant for structure. And sometimes they're done well, and sometimes they're not. Um, like you said, once it breaks off, you're there's really not much you can do except try to go in there and add magnets. But a lot of the companies are doing magnets now, anyways. So they're not really doing those big crazy keys, and if they are, it's a big fat key with a magnet in it. So it kind of doesn't that worry doesn't apply as much anymore as it used to.
That's
They've kind of it's corrected itself. The need for the swap out part and the need for the figure to not be glued together permanently. A lot of these things come in pieces now. The collector takes it out of a big fancy box, and they actually snap it all together with magnets that have all been pre-designed that way. So, and that's also because there's been a lot of breakage too. When you ship a pre-paint from China to the U.S. or wherever, um, collectors have experienced a lot of breakage with their statues, and it's not always easy to get a replacement or to get your claim honored by UPS or FedEx. It's damn near impossible, really. So
actually,
shipping it in subassembly.
I got to mention that we found out recently that unless certain shippers pack the object themselves, they do not honor claims,
Yeah,
and it's even worse
yeah.
if it goes over a border, because then the
Blame
company
it on each other.
the companies on either side of the border blame it on each other, and it basically ends up in limbo, and you will never get your claim settled. Um,
Right.
which takes it also, if you think about it, it takes it out of the hands of the manufacturing company. So if a major manufacturing company was like, well, we would have repaired it, but it went over the border and they broke it, so they're responsible for it, but they can't, it's bad news. So if you're shipping stuff, guys, make sure you communicate with your shipper and find out what their deal is on claims, because they do not want to pay for broken stuff. So they
Right.
will.
Yeah, if you go to FedEx, pay the extra money, have FedEx custom pack it themselves, and then insure it for the full amount. And if anything happens, they have to honor the claim because they packed it, and then you're covered. You got no worries.
All right, so we're
So
done with super. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say you're paying all this. These things aren't cheap. If you're paying $800 for a quarter scale kit, and then you're paying another 1,000 to have a professional guy put it together and paint it, why not go that little extra on the shipping? Don't I've had a lot of clients that they get cheap on the shipping and they don't want to pay to protect their investment, and then the thing shows up broken and they want to piss and moan, and I'm like, hey man, that's kind of on you. I mean, you can blame it on me not packing it well. You can blame it on FedEx not treating the package well, but I told you how to foolproof it, and you didn't want to go that route. So
Do you want to
you
mention
know,
the last thing that you shipped that went out of country, and it was a what scale? Is that okay mentioning that or no?
Yeah, I could mention that. So I did a 1/3 scale 3D printed bust that was backfilled with foam and resin. Um, it was packaged. It was double boxed, fully insured. It was an original sculpt, so it was a one of a kind piece for this private collector. The value was somewhere around 4 grand, and it showed up smashed into pieces. Big hole in the side of the box. Uh, go to FedEx and talk to the eventually the regional manager, and he basically explained, if you use anything loose like packing peanuts or those bags full of air where the piece can actually move and uh, move around during shipping, they won't honor that, first of all. Um, and also, if you have it, you have to have the piece in the center of the box with like 2 to 3 inches in every direction around it. So basically, the thing has to be isolated in the middle of the box perfectly. And if they can't prove that that's the way it was packaged when you sent it, they won't honor the claim for that either. He told me the only way to really 100% guarantee that your claim is going to be honored is to have them pack it themselves with their materials and with the training they've been given. And then if it still fails, then yes, we'll honor the claim. So that's where that information comes from.
And that was
Well,
a
if it
that
helps,
was a 1/3 scale model, and how much? And how much did it cost?
almost 4,000 between. He paid the sculptor to do the original sculpt, send it to me for printing. Then I did all the filling and the fitting and the assembly and then the paint. Then we shipped it off to him. So
Uh,
and he commissioned us to do 3 of these pieces, different characters from the Diablo video game. So this was number 2 of 3, and the thing showed up. Just I was upset because of all the time I put into the piece. I mean, yeah, I got my money, but it was a lot of work, and I was pretty proud of that piece too. It came out really nice, and then the whole thing to just be ruined like that. Uh, yeah, it's enough to piss you off and make you want to go choke somebody. So,
well, I'm sorry that that happened. I know that Ed and I've been
one,
talking about this for a while. It's the cost
yeah,
of these things, the shipping and moving and so on and so forth. All that stuff is just, you're making an investment on these products, and to have your work messed up, but also to not be able to have it covered by shipping. It's just a shame, and it's so frustrating. Um,
well, and on that note, that's why as unnerving as it can be for the guy who has to engineer the thing, I encourage them to cut and key it into as many pieces. Make it break apart as much as possible, so when we ship it, everything can be broken down into smaller pieces, so there's less breakage. Especially pieces like that cape,
yeah.
or like the S curl on the top of his head. Um, if you really want to be a pain in the ass, tell them, hey, make that S curl come off. I want that whole S curl piece to come off, so I can ship it separate, and I don't worry about if I ship it on the head and there's an impact on the box and the front of that head hits the packing. Is that S curl going to break off? Some people would say that that's silly. If you've ever shipped any of this stuff enough, like I have, things like that will happen from time to time. So, I think the worst one I had was I shipped a Green Goblin on a glider to Canada, and they just beat the living piss out of that package.
I, I, I,
Everything
I
was broken.
I'm pretty sure it was you that said that one box, and we got to get onto another model here, but I'm pretty sure that it was you, Ed, that said that one box went to Canada and it had a boot print in it when it got to its destination.
Yeah, you could take the tip of your foot and fit it right perfectly into the hole. It was the perfect shape of the front of a shoe or a boot. And Canada blamed U.S. Customs. U.S. blamed Canada, and ultimately the claim was denied. So my client, not only did he pay full price for the kit, paid full price for my services, he received a totally busted model, and we had insured it for the full amount, and they denied the claim. Um, you know, what do you do in a scenario like that? Um, it's not. I mean, we know whose fault it is, but when they deny responsibility for it, you can't. I don't know. But you take them to small claims court, try to sue them, but that's just more money out of your pocket, and who knows if you'll win.
Yeah.
Um,
All right, so we're done with
really,
Superman. I want to take a look at the next model. Ed, you want to tell people a little bit about this? Because I started working on this just recently for Ed. We actually we have a funny story. I'm not sure if we're telling it today, but you want to tell
nope,
people a little bit about this one?
you share too much. Um, no, so this model is a piece that I'm producing, but I partnered up with Eric Sosa, and I basically said, hey man, do a really awesome Devil Man for me, however you want. And what we wanted to do was do a print to order rather than a mold and cast, so that we'll only make as many as we actually sell. We won't end up with molds sitting around for pieces we don't have enough orders for. Also, it allows us to print it in any scale that the customer would like. We can do it in different materials. So if you want me to do this, like, if you want me to print the bust in a translucent light blue flesh color, I can mix up the resin and put it in the printer. That's how it'll print it out. If you want the wings to be clear or just slightly tinted so that the membrane is see-through, we can do that. Um, I also wanted to be able to, on the larger scale, on the quarter scale and the 1/3 scale versions, for people to be able to order them from me with glass eyes installed. And
And
that's
that's
the
what we're
reason for this.
yeah, that's what we're going to be
Also,
talking about right
the
now. Is the I'm going to show you guys how I'm setting up the glass eyes, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry.
yeah, also the parts fit. When I originally sold the 1/6 scale version of these at Wonderfest this past summer, the clearances were like super tight. So everyone who bought one uh, probably couldn't build it. There was no clearance. Um, you had to sand down all of the male keys to fit everything into the bust. Um, and that's a problem. I didn't know that until after I had already printed everything out and boxed it all up. So that's my bad. So moving forward, I wanted to make sure that was no longer an issue. So I had Eric adjust that as well.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but yeah,
so
the eyes are the main focus of this.
Yeah, so you guys saw me setting this up the other day. I was drawing where I was going to do things. I'm going to show you guys how I'm gonna implement the eyes. But the most important thing for us right now is Ed and I have been talking about the eyes. We've been talking about how we were going to go about doing the glass eyes. Um, the big thing for us was how do we make sure that the eyes that we use fit the model appropriately. So I'm going to show you guys something real quickly. There are several places to buy glass eyes or acrylic eyes or prosthetic eyes or whatever. We almost always look at taxidermy places because they provide really nice quality eyes. We don't have to mess around with acrylic or whatever. And you can get a range of things. You can't get everything because they're normally not making customized, but there are companies out there that do it. But what we're looking for is something with a discrete measurement. Excuse me, that gives us a really good idea about what the eyes are going to look like. So just because it's pretty and it looks cool, I'm going to grab this gecko eye and I'm going to show you what I mean. So I like this company. I recommend this company. It's not the only company out there. But we can select the size, and right now we're looking at a 14 millimeter eye for the model. Now the model has a 1 millimeter clearance on the eye, so I can choose this eye, I can get the price, and I can look at the type of profile for the eye and its mounting. Now we'll probably break the mounting off, but the two different profiles are set up differently. This one, I believe, is a little bit shallower, but it's also a little bit more domed, spherical. And we're looking at the external diameter. This is a great company to buy from. It's called Taxidermy by Taxidermy Eyes. You see the link up top. It's taxidermymy.by. I believe they're out of the UK. Um, but moving on from this, I don't care where you get your eyes from. Just know that you're going to want to find a company that provides them in discrete measurements. Some companies only provide them in certain sizes. This one provides them in a range of sizes. Um, on this guy, the eyes were sculpted as part of the model, and we had to make a couple of minor changes to the eyes so that we can get eyes in there. And more importantly, we're making a sample. I just sent Ed this sample here that's off on the side, which is a cutout of the eye. I dropped a sphere in there. I thickened up the eyelids a little bit, and he's going to print this out. It's a small piece. I mean, this is um, it's about the size of a small box, like something you'd get, a small bottle of Tylenol in. And he can go ahead and he can experiment with this. He can order an eye, see if it fits, and go from there. Because I'm not ready to commit the eyes. So if I go back to the model, show you guys what we're talking about. I had to drop in 2 spheres. We put a basic pupil in there to see how big it was going to be. We had to check the orientation for the pupil, and then I had to mask off and push back the material that was there previously from the original sculpt, because I need to make sure that the eyelids are thicker. And also, we also tucked in the corners of the eyes just a little bit to match up with the spheres a little bit better, because the end user is going to want a piece without enormous gaps. Now, have you had models with prosthetic eyes before?
Yeah, over the years, there's been a few kits that have either come with glass eyes or allowed their hollow cast, the larger scale stuff. You could put eyes in, but also some of the dyno modelers have shown ways of, without doing all of this, just taking a Dremel and grinding out the eyelids and into the orb of the eye, and then putting like bird eyes in, which is what gave me the idea. Um, but we talked about it, and since we're printing this and it's hollow and it'll be large enough, if we could just make that face piece come off and be able to see the inside of the actual inside of the face, you can just plunk them down in there, pick the eye position you want, and what I'm going to recommend, if I have some around, for fixing that is, here it is. So you can get a small amount of this, or you can buy a large kit. And a lot of sculptors are going to already know about this, but
I'm going to move you
a
over
company
here.
called Aves Epoxy Sculpt. Yeah, I got a little.
Yeah, I love Aves Epoxy Sculpt because yeah, when you mix the 2 parts up, you can use a little bit of water, and it's water soluble until it cures. You can sand it. You can even put it on a mill in some cases, a small mill if you were doing that. You do a lot of really cool stuff with Aves. It's a really great product. Um, I know a lot of people out there that do models with green stuff. I've never really used green stuff. I always use Aves. Um, just so you, in case anybody hasn't seen this before, the way that we're cutting this is these red lines are marks. So I'm cutting it through the corners of the eyes, through the bridge, and we're going to take off this sort of crown piece. That way we can get into the cavity where the eyes are going to go. One of the things that Ed can do is that he can put a little bit of the Aves on the in the cavity, because I'm going to use a full sphere for the cavity, and he can basically add that to the eye, situate it, put the crown on, make sure that it's right, and either leave it there to bond or add a little bit of bonding agent, pop it out, wait for it to harden, add a little bit of bonding agent like cyanoacrylate glue or whatever. I wouldn't use cyanoacrylate glue near acrylic though, because it tends to cloud. Is that right?
Yep, yeah, yeah. What I would recommend doing is, so if you were to brush on a little bit of Vaseline to the inside of the face, and then put the Aves on the actual headpiece itself, basically behind the eyes. Uh, Put the eyes in, and then you know get them in the spot you want them. Press the face on and let it set up. The Vaseline is going to protect the faceplate from sticking to the Aves, so it'll peel off, and you'll just have to wash it with some warm soapy water, and you're good to go. But that's the best way to get a nice, tight, perfect uh, seal without anything sticking to the eggs if you don't want it to. No,
That's
but it doesn't let you play around with it a lot either. You kind of have to, be intentional with the whole thing. So, You know, put the eggs in, put the eyes where you want them, move them a little bit, smush it down, and leave it alone.
Right.
Otherwise, you could have some problems.
Right. Now, I want to mention this. There are going to be a few different scales. Now, this is a 1/3 scale. We're using a 14 millimeter eye. Okay. If we were to take this down to another scale, I think what's the other scale? There's another. What's the next large scale? I don't know.
We'll go as low as 1/8 scale, and
Just
then
for
one
just for
sixth.
eyes though.
Oh, just for eyes, yeah. Um, quarter scale and 1/3 scale. So
Okay.
1/4 and 1/3.
So when I scale this down for quarter scale, I may have to make some adjustments. So the choice of eye that I may want to use, or the size of eye now may not be appropriate at 1/4. I'm gonna have to do some math and double check it. But I'm already giving these eyes a small amount of tolerance, roughly a millimeter in total, so that's 0.5 millimeters left and right. Um, at the end of the day, when you change scales and you're buying aftermarket parts, you have to change scale. You have to change scale with the aftermarket part in mind before you change the scale. Otherwise, you're going to cause yourself an infinite number of headaches for the end user um, if you don't do that. Um, I pretty much am done on this, talking about this for the stream. Unless Ed wants to add anything else, I wanted to just like let you guys know that this is what we were covering today. But yeah, Ed, do you have anything you want to add about this product and what have you?
No, not really. Nothing that would really matter as far as helping someone who's learning how to sculpt or learning how to engineer parts. Or I mean, most of everything I'm going to have is aimed more at uh, keeping the builder and painter in mind when you're developing these types of things.
Yeah,
So
and
it
I
may
want
be
to
really easy for you to sculpt it.
yeah, and I want to thank you for asking me to work on this. This has been really exciting. I actually got to make a base for this model because it didn't come with a base, did it?
Came with a very basic, like a chest piece looking round kind of pedestal, like something that looked like it was turned on a lathe,
Oh,
which
okay.
was fine. I just thought it would be cool if we're gonna go all out and produce this in different scales and then be able to add the eyes. You might as well trick out the base a little bit as well. Give something a little more visually appealing, so painters can play with the textures and all that good shit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for coming out, checking out this video. If you guys have questions, leave them in the chat. Let us know what you guys think. We're going to be trying to get this kit finished up in the next couple of days, and hopefully you guys can check out Ed's stuff and see where he's painting and what he's painting. And yeah, I'm excited. This Devilman is awesome. And if you haven't watched the anime or read the manga, go out there and check that out too.